Connecticut is certainly an expensive place to live. We all know that. But if you want to live in an expensive town, there are very few options. Today, some eye-opening results from an investigation by the Connecticut Mayor. And the reporter who did that investigation is Jacqueline Rabe Thomas, and she's with us here today. Jacqueline, good to see you on the program.
Thanks for having me.
This was really fascinating. What's the biggest thing you learned from this?
That the amount of affordable housing in about 1/4 of Connecticut's municipalities has actually declined over the last 30 years. So there's been all these efforts over the last, 3 decades, and the result has been the rate of housing available for those with limited income has actually decreased in many municipalities. And the common theme among those municipalities is that they're higher income communities.
And I forget the exact wording that you wrote, but you said something like, this is one of the worst states in the country in terms of where we see the separation of rich towns and poor towns.
Right, so if you look at different demographics of where wealth inequality, we have some of the largest disparities in income between rich and poor in Southwest Connecticut in the country compared to the rest of the country. And if you look at race, we have the largest differences in where people are actually living as well.
Which is stunning because Greenwich and Darien also show up on the list of the wealthiest towns in the nation, and Bridgeport always shows up as one of the poorest cities, and
right.
They're only a few towns apart. So how do these towns get this done where they just don't have to have affordable housing? Housing.
We do have a state law that says that you're not allowed to discriminate against the type of housing that you allow to be issued. There was a Supreme Court decision in Connecticut, 3 decades ago that said there are ways that municipalities are finding ways around that through things like having minimum housing lot requirements and stuff like that, and said, that's a form of economic discrimination. Fix it, legislature. And so what the legislature did back then was they created this ability for developers to go to the courts and seek help if a local town authority has decided not to allow their project to move forward. That can take years to work its way through courts, and with time costs money of people paying property taxes on the properties that they've purchased, coming up with all the different litigation costs that come up with that. So it's an expensive venture to open in some of these communities. Delay is a tactic.
One of the things I saw in your report that caught my attention, Avon requires 15 acres for a 2-unit home, compared with 1/3 of an acre for a single-family residence. That is quite the requirement.
Monroe requires 70.
70 acres.
70 acres. In their high opportunity district, they require 20. So they've carved out a portion of their town that they consider a high opportunity district, or their housing opportunity district, and they require 20 acres. So the reality of that is, do you think anyone's going to build a duplex? They're going to buy 20 acres or 70 acres or 15 acres to build 2 units of housing? The math just doesn't work out for people.
Why don't towns want affordable housing in their communities?
So there are a lot of stated reasons. Some of them, do have some credibility. Things like it's on a really busy street, there's no sidewalks. But sometimes when a developer says, hey, let's build sidewalks, they're shut down and they're not allowed to sort of move forward with that. Or if they offer to build a road, a second entrance, there's no sort of forward movement to overcome any sort of legitimate concerns, or there's a lot of pushback. So there's also, the concern with property values, the neighborhood character. So there's a range of reasons that can be cited, some of them legitimate, some of them are not.
And some might say there's a racial component to it as well.
Right, so what I found through reading through transcripts and sitting through hours of planning and zoning meetings were, some situations where there were some of those racial undertones going on, where, these type of people are going to be drug addicts. These type of people will only be able to eat at Dunkin' Donuts. So there was some sort of eye-opening comments that are made that you're like, wait, did they really just say that? And by the way, it's not just coming from some local residents. There's also been some incidents in Oxford. For example, there was concern about traffic patterns during Cinco de Mayo in an affordable housing complex.
This also, you mentioned, this runs counter to the state's liberal image. This is a blue state run by Democrats, controlled the state legislature for 22 years, the governor's mansion for 8. What does the governor and other Democrats say about this problem?
The current governor, Governor Lamont, he wants to have conversations with developers and with the local municipal leaders, and hopefully, change hearts and minds in order to get things to move forward. What you'll hear from some of the developers or from some of the housing advocates is that's been tried before. That's been going on for years. The former governor, Governor Malloy, he took more of a hard-lined approach to say, let's get this through, and really sort of tried to embolden state laws to link state money to affordable housing. If you're not doing enough to have affordable housing open in your community, we're going to link state funding to that. There's also been some federal efforts to do that as well that haven't gone very far.
It's a fascinating investigation. There's so much in there, so you can look for it on the Connecticut Mayor website. I'll also tweet it later today as well for you. Jacqueline Rabe Thomas, we thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me
today. In just a moment, the new Commissioner of Veterans Affairs. And we welcome your comments about today's program or Face the State on social media. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.